Good evening and welcome to this evening's webinar by the South Downs Network. Okay, we're going to commence the evening now. This is a panel discussion with questions and answers. I'll take you through some of the housekeeping measures in just a moment. First of all, though, about the South Downs Network, I'm not going to read this whole slide out, so don't worry. We are a network of organisations right across the National Park area. Lewes is in the National Park, and those organisations include CPRE, the Countryside Charity, wildlife trusts, right down to local organisations like the Railway Land Trust in Lewes and other organisations. Our aim is to ensure that the development of the national park is in environmental standards. So I'll carry on with the next slide. So the format of the evening is I'm just going through some introductions and housekeeping matters just at the moment. Then I'll go on to the background to tonight's talk, and then I'll introduce Human Nature, who are speaking tonight. They will then do a presentation, and then we'll have a discussion and question and answer. We'll have a summary at the end, and that will take us to maybe somewhere between 7:30 and 8 o'clock, depends on how many questions there are. So I'll go on to my next slide now. First of all, if you've got any questions, you can, or observations you wish to make, on your screen at the bottom or on the side, it depends what sort of computer you've got, there'll be a Q&A box or there'll be a chat box, and you can put your questions or observations in those boxes, and we'll come to those later on in the presentation. What's going to happen tonight is we're going to allow Human Nature to do their presentation, and then we'll do the questions and answers afterwards. But if before we get to that point and you want to say something, please put it in the chat box or the Q&A, and if you're having to disappear, we'll try and answer that then, or we'll save it till the actual question and answer session. Once Human Nature have finished their presentation, it will be possible also to raise your electronic hand. That's another icon on the screen, which is will be at the bottom. Raise your electronic hand, and then you can ask your question in person. This session will be recorded, and we'll publish it on our website so that people can see the results of what everybody said. We'll try and also make sure we answer any points people make that haven't been dealt with properly tonight on that same website. What's the background to where we are at the moment? Well, the big problem we've got with house building and development, the built environment, if you like, is that at the moment standards are very low, and emissions from the residential sector, as you'll see here, are about 15%. And if you add into that some of the emissions from the business sector and the emissions from transport, that whole area comes to something near 15% into 50% in terms of emissions. So if we are to tackle climate change, we need to live more sustainably, we need to build our homes in a sustainable way, and we need to travel around in a sustainable way. The government's own climate change committee have constantly reminded the government of the importance of tackling climate change and introducing measures that will deal with climate change. Various companies, maybe this one included, are actually going ahead and trying to tackle it in their developments, which is good. Well, tonight's talk focuses on North Street in Lewes. It's what people call a brownfield site. It's already been developed. And we and many of our member organisations, CPRE especially, believe that before we build on greenfield sites, we should rebuild on brownfield sites. And the North Street area in Lewes is a large brownfield site, which ought to be developed. It's got a long history, as I may have mentioned in our invitation to you for this meeting tonight. It's got a long history. We are now at a different juncture. I'm going to introduce human nature now. The talk is going to be led by Chelsea Renton, and she'll be supported by Andy and Dan in the talk. So Chelsea, I'm going to take down my slide and hand over to you so that you can present for this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Vic. Andy, who's actually going to be talking about something else, is also my temporary IT consultant this evening in case this goes wrong. So that should be up.
It looks like it's coming up. That's great.
Great. I hope you can all see that. Thank you very much, Vic and Christine. We're all delighted to be here this evening. We're breaking this up into three slideshows. I'll just talk to you all a little bit about human nature, our vision, and what we're up to. Dan Ray from Periscope is leading our master planning team, big team of people working on the site, and about 7 or 8 different architecture practices, the designers, the engineers. So he's the best person to talk you through the actual site and what we're doing on it. Andy Tugby is in the human nature team, and he's part of the delivery unit in terms of sustainable materials and construction. So that's the way we're going to spread it out this evening, and hopefully leave lots of time for questions and answers. We won't be able to cover half of what we'd like to talk, but we'll give it a jolly good go. I put that up so you can see me on the left, just in case I wasn't here in a picture. And this, of course, is the Human Nature office in Lewes, which some of you may know or not. Human Nature is we call it a campaigning development company, because development has become a campaign. It needs to become a campaign. If you think of those stats that Vic was just talking to you about, we have a few projects going forward, but the one we're going to talk about tonight is the Phoenix project, that brownfield site in Lewes, called the North Street site. We call it the Phoenix site because we need to, well, it's the name of the old ironworks that were here, but we need to raise from the flames we're creating around us and build and design in a new way. Just a little bit of background, I'm sure it will come up later. Human Nature bought the site, well, we acquired the site in about April this year. We've already signed up to a planning performance agreement with the National Park. We're about halfway through it. And that's a different, you might know about them. It's sort of, we're working alongside them as our master plan develops, as we go through different iterations of how we want to design the site. And we have specialists, groups of the park on flood issues or transport issues, etc. We've had our first design review session, and we're just setting off on the next round of working groups and discussions, and we hope ultimately to put in a planning application in May next year. This will be an outline planning application for the site with some areas in detail, and then we will be adding in more over the next years. It will be a phased scheme. I said we're a campaigning development company because we really are. This isn't climate change, it's not climate crisis, we're in a catastrophe. And we really, really need to think how we build, live, move around differently. Greenwash, a little bit of sustainability, the odd solar panel on a roof is no longer enough. We have to completely rethink how we do it. And if you're anything like me, we all know we can go and plant a tree, we can complain about scallop dredgers ruining our inshore waters, we can go and pick up some plastic, but it never feels like enough. And if you feel you're going to do more than that, it feels like a sacrifice. because you feel like you have to change your life so much in terms of how you can make a difference and what's the point if no one else is doing it. But our view is that if we look at the way we build and construct and use energy, or have done for the last decades, if we build new places that are rooted in sustainability, rooted in green energy supply, rooted in electric mobility, walking, cycling, we change the way we behave, and we live in places like this, we can make it easy for each other to do it together. It doesn't have to be a sole battle. We need to do it as whole neighborhoods, as whole villages. When we have what we call our circle of impact, which is the 10 key steps we need to take, each of which has a lot of points under each, which wouldn't have fitted onto the slide, which we think are what we have to apply to every project we do if we really are to maximize the regenerative impact of development. It doesn't have to be a negative, it can be a positive. I thought that I might just go back and just quickly just fill you in on the backstory on this site, but also actually about myself. Sounds slightly egotistical, but I think that when we're looking ahead in terms of how we're going to develop going into the future, into the 21st century, and to meet the challenges of the 21st century, yes, we need the best architects, the best engineers, the best designers, but we also need communities, we need real people, we need locals, we need people who actually know about their neighborhood, we need campaigners, we need people who actually want to do things differently. Otherwise, the fear is we just go through the same old, a site comes up for sale, you'll go, who the hell's bought that? Who's developing it? You send in some complaints, nothing much happens, some hoarding goes up telling you there are going to be some luxury apartments for sale. You don't feel like you've been a part of it. We need as local communities to get involved in development. And that's exactly what happened to me. I'm not a planner, I'm not a developer traditionally, but I've got to know a lot about it because I live in Lewes and this is my home and I want it to be different. So this was the site in the last century and earlier, the old Phoenix iron and steel works. In the last 30 years, or after the iron and steel works closed down, all the sheds and old buildings on site got filled with all sorts of businesses, garages, manufacturers, storage, but primarily a huge bubble of creative industry, as so often happens when land comes up for sale and is sort of slightly in a limbo land as different planning applications come through. I always felt passionate about this site. This was a survey, 223 jobs in the creative industries on the Phoenix estate. That wasn't done by campaigning groups, that was done by the developers at the time. And this was always our interest on the site in the past and now, is that how can one do a new development which is also about living, working, playing, being creative, not just homes. In about 2012, the site was, many of you know, bought by the North Street Quarter Limited, and they brought forward a planning application over the following 2 years. A large group of local people, of which I was a member, established themselves as a campaigning group for the propositional idea for the site. We weren't saying, no, don't develop it. We were going, yep, let's develop it. We really need the houses, but let's make sure that it's also sustainable and it also retains space for work and for creative industries. After 2 years, this was our final master plan for the site. We had about 600 homes for it. All those yellow buildings were retained industrial buildings, a car park at the entrance to the site to catch the cars before they went in, to keep the streets clean and unpolluted. I only mention this is because this was a campaign run in Lewes with about 2,000 members behind it. And although we didn't own the land, we started our own planning performance agreement with the park and ran our application in parallel to the owners, just because we wanted to influence it. We wanted to see we can do things better and we can create a proper mixed-use neighbourhood if we work together. We took these ideas and plans on various roadshows around the town as the North Street Quarters planning application came up to determination. Again, always trying to deliver it managed to get a lot of people involved, including David Dimbleby, you can see, who came along and hosted debate on how we should be developing our town. And some of you might have even marched on this march about a week before the determination. And as you see, that sign at the beginning, yes to the development, but let's do it brilliantly. Let's do it better. So that was back in 2016. The North Street Quarter got their planning application, but then we went into several years of hiatus, whereas nothing much happened. And as we always thought, it came back on the market with a granted scheme, but not a viable scheme in most people's estimation. Happy to talk about that later. It came back on the market about 2 years ago at exactly the same time that the two directors of Human Nature turned up in Lewes, including the CEO who'd come to live here again, and looked at it and said, let's buy the site. So I joined them, as did a number of other local Lewes people, and joined Human Nature, and we managed to acquire the site in April of this year. So since then, well, we've been hard at work. In the months before even we acquired it, we worked for some months on a blueprint for the Phoenix. So this was looking at precedents, ideas, designs, sustainable living concepts, etc., from around the world, and saying, and we put together 20 concepts. This is maybe 80-page long document. It would have been too long for you, which we used from the beginning and gave to our architects and designers, and going, this is how we need to think. As we move forward with this development, as we start working up the designs. I will just pick up on a few of them, and I think this is the most important. If we're talking about sustainable development and living, if you look at the diagram on the left, the clone zones, this is what we've all got used to. You've got your industrial park, you've got maybe your retail park, you've got your residential suburb. So much of development over the last decades has been split and separated. You have to get into your car more often than not to get the thing you want, because you can't get it near your house. And also this sort of breakup of what happens in different parts of towns, I think also in many ways has led to an element of breakdown of community and loneliness, because you're not out in the street doing all the things you want to do and bumping into people, unless you're lucky enough, say, to live in central Lewes or something like that. Our feeling is that, and this is something that has been picked up by many people around the world, particularly during lockdown, actually, was the idea of the mixed use, walkable neighborhood. We call it the 5-minute neighborhood down in here. In Paris, they call it the 15-minute neighborhood. In Barcelona, I think it's a 10-minute neighborhood. And if you go through it, it means that the first point being live, you have your home, you should be able to walk to where you work as much as possible. That's what we want to do here. You should be able to walk to be able to get to the shops. And I mean, in Lewes, of course, we've got the high street. We don't need a new high street down here, but you might be able to walk here to get some bread or some coffee. You want to be able to play, you want to be able to listen to music late at night, you want to be able to get some exercise all close to home, and you want to be able to get access to learning, to apprenticeships. For us, one of the most important things to do to create a sustainable neighborhood is get people out of their cars. And to do that, you need to be able to provide what they need within walking distance of their home. And so, of course, the other thing we have to ask ourselves is how much do we really need 3-4 bedroom terraced houses with big private gardens? Can we really afford to keep on going like this? We've got precious brownfield land. We need to build lots of homes. So why don't we build smaller, more compact, incredibly well designed, well insulated, sustainable homes and start sharing more? Why don't we share our laundrettes again? Why don't we have tool stores, co-working hubs, maker spaces, community canteens, allotments? Our idea for the Phoenix is to have maybe about 80% of the properties on here will be much smaller homes, sort of apartments, duplexes, and lots of shared spaces at the bottom of the street or at the bottom of the block and all around. Of course, you need private space too, but our feeling, sorry, I'm just sounding rather egotistical, is that as long as everyone has a threshold or a balcony or a space on a roof, enough to pull up a pram, to have a coffee, to read a book, a bit of defendable private space, then you can share the rest of it. And this can include courtyards and, of course, rooftops, which could also be used for food growing, meeting, play, all sorts of things. And of course, if we're going to be living in smaller homes and sharing more, we need to make sure that the public realm, the streets, the pavements are really, really fantastic for living in. I noticed during lockdown, I don't know how many people on this webinar are from Lewes. I lived on just opposite the Elephant and Castle. Lots of traffic, lots of cars parked in the street, nobody outside. Across the way from me was New Road, along the side of just above the paddock, along up there, tiny little houses in a line, a long street and a wall and a drop away, nowhere to park at all. And that, I think, was the happiest street I saw in lockdown, because every time you looked up it, everybody was sitting out on benches on the street, chatting, kids on skateboards, people playing music. It was because the street was theirs to sit in and enjoy. And it wasn't for cars and it wasn't for pollution. So we, without a doubt, on the Phoenix, and I'm sure Dan will be talking about this more, we are going to be building streets for people and not for cars. We'll be catching cars at the entrance to the site in a mobility hub. Well, it's a multi-story car park, for want of a better word, well designed, but with a huge EV, freight, car hire, car share club at the bottom, so to minimise the need for private car ownership and to maximise the possibilities for the streets to be for people. If they were in, these streets were in France, the men would be playing pétanque on them. They're in England, so it might, we'll have to find other games to play, but they need, that streets should be for playing and living in. Obviously, we need to super green every angle, every street, every rooftop. This is a barren site at the moment. It's interesting how one thinks of development as being barren and not good for ecosystems and biodiversity, but they can be, and they must be, green, blue infrastructure. We simply wouldn't do it any other way. And of course, that would include food growing. Youthfulness is another very important point for us. And I think this is also about sustainability, because we want to enable more intergenerational living. It's more fun that way anyway, but we also need to find a way, particularly in a town like Lewes, to make it more attractive for young people. I mean, I've brought up teenagers in here, and after they've left after the age of about 13, 14, there's not much to do really, except for sit on a bench by the Pels and have a fag. And then when you're old enough, you can start going to a pub or a nightclub in Brighton. There's nothing to do in between. So we really want to make sure that this development down here, that there's music, there's activity, there's things to do, there's play spaces on the corner of all these wonderful streets. And of course, we want to be looking to finding kind of starter homes for young people. And almost the last slide from me, I'm whizzing through, there's so much to talk about. And of course, the whole neighborhood has to be based around the principle of zero waste and circularity. And this is from food through to compost, through back to growing and through to food again. It might be exactly the same in terms of maker spaces, in terms of the materials that are being used, the recycling and the back to materials being used. And it's again, in the same, you could talk about circularity in terms of ideas, imagination, training. So I've always thought it quite interesting when you have co-working hubs of people, they're quite often divided from each other, but when you can have a co-working hub where the machinery, the tools, the ideas, the training are also a form of circularity. I'm nearly finished here. There are lots of other topics we can talk about in terms of sustainability and living, but I think Dan and Andy will be picking up on them in their talks. I just wanted to bring you up to date on where we are. So as I said, we acquired the site in April, been working ever since then on the plans and alongside the park. We've had a huge amount of sort of community consultation, neighbours, tenants, councillors, community groups, social enterprises. I think there's over 130 different groups that we've met from around the town, and all these ideas and thoughts have fed into our ideas over the last 6 months. And in early September, we had our first public consultation. This wasn't a statutory consultation. That will happen later before we get to putting in an outline planning application. This was when we wanted to show everybody where we had got in our thinking in terms of the layout of the site and the types of homes we were going to build, how much non-residential space we are desperate to provide and keep, more than you would normally have, so that people can work here, they can play here. We had, over those 3 days, we had an incredible turnout and received a huge amount of feedback. And since September, we've been, sorry, why I said February, since September, we've been analysing that feedback, and it has been feeding into the new round of designs, which we will be able to start show to everybody at the beginning of next year. The feedback report will actually come out next week. So the last thing I thought I'd show you before I hand it back was actually the highlights film from the festival, just to give us a little bit of light relief. This weekend is the Phoenix Project Design Festival. This is our 3rd day. We've had 2,400 people through so far on our clippers, and it's been an incredible mixture of people from all over the town coming in, looking at our drawings, our designs, our master plans, listening to great music and dance.
This whole weekend design festival is an opportunity to speak to the people that live here and the people that want to live here in the future, the politicians, the planners, and just hearing all of these views and trying to work them into the design as we go forwards.
The concept here for the master plan is very much to create a rich mix with a diversity of architects, diversity of building types, diversity of housing offer, so that we really create a place that is sustainable and caters for a wide need and becomes a place where people want to live.
This is not a banal, ordinary development. Human Nature are partnering with some of the best leading specialists in urban design, regeneration and architecture to create what we think will be a really thriving, contemporary piece of city.
Phoenix Project is actually one of the most unique opportunities I've ever worked on in 15 years of practicing, to bring all of the learnings together for making sustainable places in one project and actually deliver it.
We've got real power when we're creating a new neighbourhood to step change into a new normal. A way of living where sustainability is easy, affordable, attractive and accessible for as many people as possible.
It's not just about trying to hope that people's behaviour changes, it's actually embedding that in the master plan itself.
This whole project is conceived as a place that puts shared living at the heart of it. And what's really special about that is that's how I think people should be living, in a more participatory way, in a way where we live more sustainably and much closer to our neighbours.
The challenge of building what's been drawn here is quite immense, because a lot of things that are being proposed have not really been done before, certainly not in the United Kingdom on this sort of scale.
Lewes has beautiful old buildings dating from medieval times onwards, and they express local timber, local materials. There's an opportunity to redefine that vernacular tradition for the modern age. I don't think that's being done anywhere else, and I think it's going to be doing really well here.
Chalk potentially offers an opportunity to kind of replace really high carbon materials like cement and concrete.
One of the unique things about this development is that we keep quite a lot of the existing buildings and draw on the existing culture and community that has already been thriving for many years.
I think what's special is the wide variety of different people working on this project. I think that real interdisciplinary kind of mess of people creates a real richness.
We're going to be creating something which has got some diversity in it, which really honours the traditions of Lewes.
We're really enjoying trying to get that sense of Lewes onto a site that's quite complicated.
Being on the South Downs National Park Design Review Panel, I realised how important Lewes is to that bigger picture. It is the westernmost extent of the park. And amazingly, this project could impact the entire park and beyond.
It's not just a number of homes on this site, it's including networks, community and social that are already here and working with them and developing in a way what Lewes needs.
Here there's a feeling that you're building a legacy, you know, that you're going to build something that is really going to be worthwhile, that is going to be exemplary.
It's been really nice to see the community come down here.
If this is an example of the mood of the new development, then great, it's a great start, and we hope that it will be.
For me, it was a meeting of like minds, the fact that you would have like-minded people around you to reawaken these sort of energy that was behind Phoenix and Zoo and the Foundry and all the other things that went on down here. It's deeply heartening, and these sort of like the good vibrations are coming up literally through the floor.
I think what particularly stood out for me was the lack of vehicles that will be kind of circulating around the area. So that would be amazing.
The whole ethics behind it seem great. Feels like they're including the community in the decision-making process.
I've been walking around talking to people, and the level of positive support, enthusiasm, even passion, it's fantastic.
Thank you.
Right, so Chelsea, you're going to hand over to your colleague now, I presume. Is that correct?
I think it's me next, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, over to you, Daniel.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen if I can manage that. Just bear with me. Yeah. Does that come up? I'll take that as a yes.
That's good. Yep, that's fine.
Very good. Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Ray from Periscope. I realise I've been pre-introduced in the video, of which I think I'm actually wearing the same shirt in one of those videos. That's slightly embarrassing reality. But anyway, I'm speaking to you from our offices in London. We're for now, at least. Apparently, we may not be doing that from Monday, but anyway, it's another story. Well, I've been working with Human Nature for 5 or 6 years on a number of projects, and I'm delighted to be able to join you today to talk about this one, which is by far and away the most ambitious that they've worked on, I think, and certainly that I've worked on. It's also incredibly challenging, and Chelsea set out some of the challenges that face the project, but also the opportunities, and we really are trying not to do business as usual in pretty much every aspect of the project. The development takes time. It takes time to plan, it takes time to design, it takes time to deliver, at the end of this decade, hopefully, before this is built out. So we can't design using today's thinking or yesterday's thinking, because by the time we build this out, it will be so outdated, because the climate crisis is pushing us to think more in a more extreme way about how we can solve it. I know there were some comments in the chat earlier about the kind of using the catastrophizing words, but I think in order to mitigate future climate change, we really do have to think very progressively now. So I'll try to outline how we're doing that through the design process here. Some of this work is principally work that we discussed in and around the Design Festival. That was a couple of months ago now, and we've been moving it on. And some of that work I can't share with you yet, but there are a few slides at the end that are hot off the press that no one else has seen in public. So you can look forward to those. This drawing here on the first page is just trying to illustrate, is here as a background, because I think it's really important to illustrate that we're trying to work this project really hard, and that's part of the 5-minute or 15-minute city idea. But the reuse of buildings, intensive public access, high intensity community use, surrounded by residential, new connections, lots of different transport modes, super green development, and it all coalesces around this new centre, which we're planning as a kind of complementary area to the high street of the town, with a new bridge that crosses over the river. But before I get onto all of that, I mean, it's been a delight to work in Lewes over the past 6 months. You know, sometimes people call us down from Londoners. My wife tends to call me up from Lewes these days because I seem to be there quite a lot of the time. But it's a fabulously interesting town. I'm sure a lot of people on this call know it better than I do, but I've tried to get to know it well in the last 6 months. So we started working on this in March, April this year. The site is to the north of the town centre. It's kind of severed from the town centre by the causeway and the new bridge that runs over the river. I say new, it's one of the newest one. And it's, as Chelsea outlined the history of it, but Lewes is often referred to as a box of toys, and it has a lot of different urban conditions. It's got dense development, sort of some of it's quite tall. People tend to think of Lewes as 3 and 4 stories, but the district council offices are significantly more than that, and up on the top of the hill. And there are new developments that are 5 and 6 stories. The high street's super varied. It's got a lot of independent shops. We love that about it. But the Phoenix site sits at the kind of interface of the wider downs and the floodplain landscape and the town. So they're where landscape characters meet, and landscape character is particularly important in planning and designing the Phoenix project, because we're obviously within the South Downs National Park, and it's a landscape-led approach to development, which the local planning authority wants us to take. But also, you know, what that actually means is not just looking at the visual impact of the project on the immediate setting and trying not to damage views of the downs. It's about what we call ecosystem services and the landscape's ability to support human life. And so I'm not just looking at the visual aspects, but also green infrastructure, so how ecology connects, blue infrastructure, how we're supporting and improving biodiversity in the river, but also through sustainable drainage systems. Also, but looking at everything through to construction technology, which Andy will talk about in more detail after I've finished. But we can support woodland enterprises and a whole series of local supply chains through the development of the project using locally available materials and managing ecosystems in which those materials grow. So timber, the use of timber, for example, in the downs themselves can actually support a much wider positive environmental footprint than we originally sort of thought of just by looking at the site.
Sorry to interrupt, Dan. Somebody said their audibility is not too good, so maybe if you could be a bit closer to the screen. Thank you.
How's that? Let's try that and see if it's better.
No, it's slightly down. That's slightly down.
Is it? Okay. Not sure what I can do about that, but I'll just speak up, shall I? How's that?
Speak up. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the Pels. It's next to the site. It's a riverine environment. It's the end of the floodplain that comes into Lewes next to the Ouse. It's an important context. We have not just the river, but the local wetland context. In that context, we're at the edge of the floodplain. That's important for us in terms of ecosystem types. We have the river. The project itself, you know, is on the site, which was a former industrial site, and the active use of the river is important, and the views across the town with the river in the foreground and the townscape behind, some of it better than others. You know, we need to respect Lewis's urban heritage, and we're learning from material types, but also the urban morphology and the castle itself, and how views to that are important. So the setting of the town itself and the grain of it are really important in developing the master plan. And then there's the industrial heritage, and that's not just about, you know, directional roofscapes and large volume, excuse me, that's the police outside, large volume sheds that used to contain uses which no longer exist. There was, as Chelsea outlined, a very rich living cultural heritage in these buildings until quite recently, and we want to carry that on as well as just trying to look at retaining some elements of the structures on site. So I think the framework master plan, it's, as Chelsea mentioned, we started by looking at the existing buildings, and the most important thing is the retention of some of those. And we're currently looking at retaining 4 or 5 of those. So that's the foundry workshops, which is on the riverfront here, on the top left dot, the Hammonds building, which is the oldest building on site, timber frame building, Phoenix House, which is Human Nature's current headquarters, and that's a mid-century building from the 20th century, and then the soap factory, which has been reclad a number of times, but inside it is a cast steel structure. And there's photographs of the horse-mounted regiments waiting to go off to World War I in it. So it's 100 years old, that building, and so it has a value in itself. A lot of these buildings have been overclad, and we tend to think of them as kind of quite dilapidated, but actually inside these are structures that are worth keeping and celebrating. And so that's what we're proposing to do, is do the adaptive reuse of these buildings to form the core of the non-residential uses moving forward. And then this is an overlay of movement on the master plan. Obviously, connectivity and integration with the urban centre is important. So we are aware that we're going to be building a new bridge. That's a planning requirement, but also it's desirable to do that. We want to have a new connection across the Ouse to the wider communities to the north, and that allows us to make a new cycle connection that will connect all the way from the north of Lewes through the site and down into the town centre via Eastgate. We're maintaining the existing street network, primary street network on North Street and Phoenix Place, but we're trying to get a really rich grain of development, which has lots of routes, twittons. So you can see that whilst we've got some perimeter block development with straight Muse streets on the left-hand side of the plan, in the centre, the routes are more circuitous and slightly more twitton-like, and that's a reference to the urban character of Lewes. So we're trying to learn from the urban morphology. Something I will say while we're here is that the large building mass here, at least in plan, is the co-mobility hub, as proposed in the current plan, and that the aspiration is that all private car parking will take place in that building, and there won't be any on plot in the development. Which the point of that is to release and unlock the streets from having to be dominated by cars and car parking. And so that's not just about private car parking though. So mobility we're thinking of as a service in the Phoenix project. So there will be an app in the mobility hub, the big rectangular building at the bottom there, which has direct access to the causeway, or is planned to. There will be hire cars you can take them for a week or an hour. There'll be e-bikes, cargo bikes. There's likely to be a last mile distribution hub. So Amazon or equivalent will come into their deposit their parcels in there, and then that will either be distributed via electric cargo bike to the homes, or you can come and get it directly from that building. So that reduces, it's all about reducing vehicle movements and amount of parking in the site. And it just frees up space for other things that create great communities. So good streets, more public space, better public space, better routes. So the mobility story and movement and connectivity is really critical to what we're trying to do here. And then, that frees, as I said, it frees us up to make places, and we have a lot of those. So we have 2 primary streets and a series of secondary streets. There are also these light green areas are rain gardens that are in private courtyards, and then publicly accessible ones are the dark green, and then there are also the yellow courtyards, which are larger spaces which have play space within the bigger blocks. And then there's the Belvedere, which runs along the waterfront, which I'll talk a bit more about momentarily. Uses, there's going to be a lot of a high diversity of different uses. Chelsea's talked about that, but this just makes the point that they're clustered in the centre, and then there's a sprinkling of them along these streets. But the idea is that there's a kind of complementary workspace and community offer in the centre of the project, which allows us to create a diversity of units and perhaps have some smaller homes which have better access to communal facilities in the centre, which would allow homes to be accessed at different price points. So rather than just building large family homes, which have been the sort of traditional proposals for this site, we're going to have a whole range from co-living right up to larger homes. I'll come on to that in a moment. Green network is really important, so connecting to the Pales and the wider floodplain, bringing ecology into courtyards and into streets, and improving the riparian, so that's the edge of the river habitat along the Ouse is important. It's quite low ecologically valuable at the moment, and we want to improve that. And then connecting also to a green causeway and bringing that into the site too. The blue network, we need to deal with flood water from the river. So I think most of you that either live in Lewes or remember the 2000 floods, we need to defend the site against that, and also defend the Pels area, which we are proposing to do. As it's a strategy that was agreed in the previous application, but we can't build homes here if they're going to be flooded every 5 minutes. So we're trying to defend against a 1 in 100 year flood, and there is a climate change allowance of plus 35 or 40% within that. So we're building a new flood wall. And then we also have to deal with rainwater that falls on our site and runs down the hill into our site. And we're doing that not by putting in big sewers and drains, but we're going to try to deal with all of it on the surface in sustainable urban drainage systems. So in the streets, there'll be swales and rain gardens that will collect water, convey it to the river in a timely manner so that we don't increase river flooding, which is less of an issue because the Ouse is tidal, but nonetheless, we don't want to contribute to wider issues. But it allows us, in doing this kind of sustainable urban drainage system, it allows us to have ecology in streets. It avoids building big concrete tanks under homes or plastic tanks, which are expensive and not terribly, well, they're quite carbon intensive. So we have a compound benefit. And then material character, we're hoping to build the majority of structures under 18 metres high, subject to the changing rules around fire at the moment. Majority of structures in timber frame, and then there'll be a variety of cladding materials which will reference the local Lewes character. We're going to be considering mathematical tiles, flint, brick, and then other timber cladding materials, and Andy, I'm sure, will talk about that in more detail. So here's the emerging master plan in overview. So you have the centre here. There are a series of, the fire station is retained as well. There's a new residential development on the waterfront here. This is what we call the large courtyard blocks, or GEL blocks, on both sides. They are not big perimeter blocks that are uniform and monolithic. They're broken down into a series of what will look like tall terraced houses, with a very large courtyard in the centre, and I'll show you what that means later on in the talk. And then a series of lower rise homes that front onto the Pels, respecting the scale and character here, with courtyards that face south, lots of natural light. We're aiming to have principally dual aspect homes everywhere. That may not be possible when we get down to much smaller homes, but we're trying to balance affordability with having good daylighting, natural ventilation, high performance insulation, so reducing running costs for residents, but also sometimes it's due to site constraints, it's simply not possible to do that everywhere. So there will be some that are single aspect, but we're trying to go for as much dual aspect as possible because it just creates a better environment, lower carbon. And then roofs, we're targeting 60% green roofs with and that will be coupled with a photovoltaic strategy. The energy strategy for the project is to use, as far as possible, ground source heat pumps, photovoltaics on every building, and then an off-site PV array, which is part of a larger plan for South Downs National Park, and we're going to tap into that. And there will also be a battery store on site. We're currently working through the technical requirements for whether that's a consolidated battery store or it's a distributed system in individual buildings. Green at ground level, green on the roof, diversity of homes and use types, fine grain respecting Lewes, some larger buildings, lower buildings in the centre, allowing views across the centre to the castle and Brack Mount, but also having some larger buildings facing the river to reference the taller wharf buildings in the town centre. So there's a real diversity of a mix. So I just want to go through some examples of how we're working through this now. So this is some sketch studies of the elevational treatments that Ash Sakula have been working on the river, on the riverfront. So looking at roof articulation. We don't need chimneys for heating anymore, but we might need flues for other uses. This is looking into the courtyard and showing in the northeastern corner of the site and showing a kind of functional drainage landscape, which is playable with lots of articulated facades and articulated roofscapes to try to break down the mass and make the buildings feel like they're as individual as the rest of Lewes. This is a section through the river edge showing how the flood wall might be integrated into some of the buildings. So in order to be efficient with carbon and build time, we're going to try to integrate the flood wall into some of the buildings. So that will mean it's designed to have a longer life. We only build one foundation structure, and then it allows homes to come right up to the waterfront. We're also going to be having some co-living buildings, at least 2. And these are where residents have smaller units, but have some communal facilities. So there might be a larger dining hall on the higher level, so that people can have smaller living spaces. But if they want to host a dinner party, they can share that larger space. There might be a cafe that's run by residents on the ground floor, a shared tool library, cultivation in the courtyard. Those kind of things which allow the kind of shared living environment. That's a view of one of the buildings. This is a section through the Gale blocks. So it looks like an enormous park. So when I say Gale blocks, what I mean is the large courtyard blocks, which you saw 2 in the plan, one in the north and one in the southeast. This is, it looks like a huge park between the buildings because it's so large, but this allows the residents to have a really amazing amenity space, which also has a flood relief function, and it will have some community uses in it as well. So there might be a community pavilion, which can be accessible during certain hours to the wider community. And then homes with balconies that overlook the courtyard, but also the river, and a variation of roofscape at the top of the building. This is another section looking the other way. And then apartment buildings in the Pels. So what we're looking at, and I won't try and steal Andy's thunder here, but lots of different construction technologies to make these. But here are the lower rise buildings, some of which might be live work, and some of which are larger family homes, but all of which step down to the Pels to respect the heritage context. These are some of the views looking along North Street. So they're looking northeast on this one, showing articulation of facades and roof articulation. That's a courtyard sketch from the Pels apartments. So the idea is these will be very green environments. And then I just wanted to talk a bit about public realm before I get on to showing you some new visuals. I'm conscious of time. I haven't got that long left, so
yeah, I think a few more minutes if you can, please, Andy. We can always come back to this if.
Yeah, I'm going to try and do it in 3.
Okay.
So we're trying to have a really diverse public realm in the Phoenix project, and so we've done a lot of work working out how big public spaces and semi-public spaces need to be, how they function, what the scale is relative to the buildings. We've looked at precedents. We're big on high quality streets. So you can see there's some car parking in these streets, but principally they're about green and movement routes and really dignified buildings facing them, and they feel like they're for people and bikes, not just for cars. So this is a sketch section through North Street showing how it might work. So there might be there'll be tree planting, spill out space from a cafe perhaps on this side, and then lots of balconies overlooking, and then roof articulation for shared roof gardens. So that we're looking at something that's about 15 meters wide, excluding balconies, with a 6-meter carriageway, something like that. And then streets can also be twittons, and so narrower routes as well in the centre, particularly, that will be shared routes and have spill out from commercial uses. Narrow mews section there. What we're thinking about in the centre is a series of yards. So we're currently working through what these actually are. But there'll be a central event space probably, and then a series of more functional yards that relate to workspace or events uses that are on different parts of the site. there's that image coming up again. So we've got the Belvedere, which is the waterfront route, and I'll just talk briefly about that in a moment. The central event space and the new bridge. So we're opening up, sort of, depending on how you calculate it, about 600 meters of new waterfront in here. This is not publicly accessible at the moment, except for the right-hand corner of this image. So we'll have the bridge deck level is a level which takes it out of the floodplain. So we have to rise up to that. So we have this elevated walkway in the center, and that's a hard space. And then on either end, there's a softer, more rivery condition where you can get down and touch the water. So the idea is to have many different levels on which to experience the river. So this is the boardwalk coming down from that higher level Belvedere to allow people to access the river. The courtyards, as I mentioned, will also have a riverine element. They're sort of designed to flood. So this is a flood compatible playground in Denmark. There's a sketch image of some of the suds in the rain gardens in the streets, so filling up with water when it rains, but still accessible. This is a new image, and it's a sketch image, so don't take it too literally, but it's standing on the northern side of the River Ouse, looking south across the scheme, with the retained buildings in the foreground, the new bridge on the right-hand side, the retained foundry workshops with some of the roof taken off but repurposed as workspace. And in the back, there's residential development over new commercial uses. And then the Belvedere in the foreground, with roots underneath to the river. And this is the rafting festival. And then new ecological niches that allow tidal, they fill up when the river fills up when the tide is high, and then so they're semi-wet conditions. And so this allows us to have lots of different moments in the project. So it's really important, I think, that we have a diversity of experience of the river. So here's a moment where you could come down to the river and sit and have a quiet moment down at that level. And then perhaps also between the buildings, you get these views out. So it's really important for us to have views of the downs. We sit in the downs context, and so views across these. And so this is a boy having fishing in a pond that's next to their home, with a view between homes out towards the downs. So we're trying to really focus on the big picture sustainability strategies, but also making it a high quality of life for people to live here with a diversity of public realm and diversity of homes. And I think I've run out of time, but I'm very happy to answer any questions at the end. And I'm going to hand over to Andy.
Thank you very much, Dan. We now go to Andy, and then we'll go to the question and answer. I've got quite a few questions, which I will refer to when Andy has finished his presentation. So after Andy, we'll open up, all the panel can come onto the screen and talk at the same time, and we'll go through the questions. So over to you, Andy.
Hi there, my name's Andy Tugby. I work in sustainable materials and construction.
Andy, there's quite a lot of noise coming from your computer. I don't know whether it's touching the microphone or something.
Is that better?
That's much better, yeah.
Better? Okay, good. User error, I think. Yeah, I'm going to speak to you about our thoughts and ideas about materials, about construction methodologies, and a little bit about the energy strategy. Dan has stolen quite a lot of my thunder, which is absolutely fine, but I won't go too much into the energy strategy because Dan has already given us a bit of a background into it. And I'm also, on terms of the energy, I'm presenting someone else's work. So we've engaged Atelier 10 and Patrick Bellew, who is developing the energy strategy for us. So I was just going to give you an overview of where they're at the moment towards the end. So I'm just going to share my screen with you.
You should be able to do that. Yes, good.
There. Okay.
That's good.
So we at Human Nature, when we look at the way we're going to deliver this project, we approach it with a series of key principles in mind. We look at this idea of the idea of build and design. So each of these I'll go through in a little bit more detail as part of this, but just to introduce some principles, one thing we call build and design, another we call raw and craft. We look at in detail at the use of reclaimed, reused local materials. We look at whether our process is low, zero or negative carbon. And again, we have a very coordinated energy strategy, which again, I'll go into in a little more detail. So building design. So the process of building design, I imagine a number of you are familiar with the idea of design and build, which is quite a common practice in construction these days. Building design, we kind of turn things around a little bit. So using a process of deep cross-disciplinary collaboration, we look at the deliverability of a scheme really early on. So we've got a delivery unit which is composed of architects, structural engineers, timber engineers, material specialists, builders, cost consultants, building physicists. And we look at the actual buildability and the deliverability of a building before we go to any too far down the road of detailed design, purely with the purpose of being able to feed back into the design process so that we can design, so that we don't end up in a situation where architects are designing buildings that actually can't be built. We all found that in doing that in such an early stage, and this isn't something that anybody does, by the way, this is a really unusual process in the industry, but the idea of early engagement with those professionals and allows us to feed back into the design process in such a way that we can make cheap mistakes, not costly mistakes, if that makes any sense. We're also really keen on this idea of prototyping. We are not reinventing the wheel. I'm going to mix metaphors here, I'm afraid. We're not going to reinvent the wheel, but we are going to break a few molds in what we do. So we're not aiming to do anything that's completely unheard of and hasn't been done before, but we're probably going to do things in combinations that perhaps hasn't been done so commonly in the past. And we're not afraid of that. We're not afraid of making mistakes, but we're going to do it in a prototyping situation. So when you prototype, that's the point at which you make mistakes, so that when you go to your full construction, then you've learned your lessons, and we know that we're onto a winner, so to speak. And then this concept of design for manufacture and DFMA. I've lost it. Design for manufacture. Oh gosh, DFMA. So, but the idea of design for so that the buildings that we look at are designed, and the construction process becomes more of a manufacturing process than a construction process. So the off-site construction allows us to use materials effectively and efficiently, and it also allows us to make sure that the building elements, there's a quality control element with them, that we can make sure that the quality that's delivered is up to the standard that we require. We've also added on to the end of that that DFMA, for which I can't remember the A, a plus D, so assembly. There you go, design for manufacture and assembly, excuse me. So then the plus, the D that we've added on is the disassembly. So we're already looking at the end of life of these buildings. So what happens to them when they decide that when whoever's in them in however long, 100 years or whenever, decides that they don't want them to be apartment blocks anymore? How easy are they to be disassembled and reused, or for the constituent parts to be used, turned into something else? So that's all part of the process that we go through within the design and construction process. It allows us also to this process of design for manufacture and assembly allows us to rehearse the construction. So the use of a digital twin. So there is a computer model of the building as it is about to be constructed, and that design process, the production of a digital twin of the actual building, allows us to model and rehearse the construction in order, so that as things go up, we know exactly how it goes together before it leaves the factory or the construction, the manufacturing plant, which which is a really useful thing. It also allows us to do the opposite. So we can also rehearse the deconstruction of it, so that when the building comes to the end of its life, we've already prepared for that, and that detail is already available. One of our other key principles is this idea of raw and craft. Now, raw and craft is a philosophy. It's a philosophy and a practical methodology. It means that the buildings that we build they're well made, they're strong, resilient, and adaptable. But the materials that they're made for are good enough to be left raw. They're good enough and you can see in the image there, that's a hempcrete wall and a timber frame structure with a kitchen built straight onto it, and it's actually quite beautiful. Obviously, you could finish that if you wanted. You could cover it with some sort of board and a clay plaster, and it would look even more beautiful. But it's good enough in and of itself to be left in a raw state. And also as it ages, it'll age with grace. It will weather, and it'll age, and it'll probably become more beautiful as it goes on. The craft element allows us to it leaves space for the occupants to customize their spaces accordingly. And here we have another example of that hempcrete and timber cassette design in what's really quite a stunning kitchen. One of the other principles that we look at is the idea of reuse, reclaim, and local. Now, as has already been mentioned, we are planning to retain some structures. Four structures that we're retaining. We're going to the condition of those buildings, as you can see at the moment, is that they're in not particularly good state. The structures are sound, but obviously they need quite a bit of work done on them. Here we're looking at the Foundry Workshop and the Hammonds building. They're fine structures with strong heritage, and we want to try and utilize and maintain as much of that as possible. And it's quite a true saying that the lowest carbon building is the one that's already there. So where possible, we're going to use a process of detailed analysis and comprehensive auditing of what is there, and allow that to inform the design process, hopefully in order to produce some spaces like this where we can breathe new life into them and create beautiful spaces that have a different use to what they're intended, but they create a great part of the site with its own identity. Adding to that, coming back to this slide again, some of the other principles of reuse and reclaim and local are the ideas of resource mapping and anthropocenic mining. Now, this is a phrase stolen blatantly from Duncan Baker Brown, who we love the concept of mining the Anthropocene. So we're looking around and working out what is here already, what materials are on site locally, what things can we use, and how can we use it. And as part of that process, we're going to undertake quite detailed audits, conditions of the buildings that are here. All the buildings that come down to make way for the development will undertake detailed pre-demolition audits to work out what materials are there. Those materials will then go into our resource book of materials and elements that are available for use around the site. And if they can't be used on site, then we'll look and see if they can be used in other constructions elsewhere, because the idea of reuse before recycling is obviously quite key and quite important. One of the things that
I'd like to
we're
go to questions. Sorry to interrupt you, Andy. I'd like to go to questions soon.
Okay, I can just do 2 more slides, and then my last ones were the energy strategy, so I can skip those.
The energy strategy is important, so carry on.
Okay, okay. So we're looking to set up and support local supply chains for predominantly for the use of local timber, hopefully the growing local hemp if we need that for the development, and use as much as possible local labour, because Lewes, if one thing, has got a massive resource of skilled and experienced labour, certainly in timber construction. Also, the idea that the buildings are material banks and carbon stores for the future. Low, zero negative carbon. So we're trying to create a palette of materials that are available to the architects and designers, which are the lowest embodied carbon palette of materials that we can find. We're trying to refine that for them to make that available. We're also keen on capturing now carbon. Now there's this idea that when you if you're capturing carbon in a tree that's 100 years old, you're capturing carbon from 100 years ago. Whereas if you're using a material like hemp, which has got a really quick growing cycle, then it grows within about 4 months. So when you capture that carbon, that's the carbon that's in the atmosphere right now. So that's something that we're keen to look at. Again, I've touched already on structures as long-term storage, and also we're really keen to explore the idea of a zero emissions construction site, which is something that isn't it's quite difficult to do on a scale like this at the moment. In fact, it's never been done, I don't think. So we're in talks with JCB to see if we can pilot this scheme as a zero emissions construction site. What you're looking at there in the picture is a hydrogen powered telehandler there. That is a new product that we're hoping to be showcasing here. And very quickly on the energy strategy. So the approach, again, as I've said, this is not our work. This is me presenting someone else's work. But I know that the approach is to look at the fabric first. So a fabric first approach allows us to reduce the energy demand of the buildings themselves. Dan's already touched on passive solar design a little bit in terms of orientation and window optimization, so that you can reduce heating demand by allowing the sunlight in. The heating system is looking likely to be something along the lines of a ground source heat pump with community scale borehole system. Productive rooftops generally will be on every building, but there will be competition for those rooftops as the desire to have productive rooftops as well as solar PV arrays and other uses means that there's also almost certainly going to have to be an off-site or near-site PV array on quite a large scale, possibly by private wire back to a community grid. We're investigating battery storage as well as an interconnected food waste compost system. So if you look at this, this is a really complicated diagram that I'm not going to talk about in any detail at all, but it just gives you an idea of the sort of work that is being done to try and look at how all these systems interconnect with one another, so that when we deliver the energy waste water strategy, it makes sense and nothing works against one another. So there, and thank you. I think that's handing over to Q&A.
Well, that's very good, Andy. Excellent. Lots of innovative points there, both in your presentation and in Dan's presentation. Lots and lots of food for thought there. Thank you very much. We've got Chelsea on her screen on, your screen is on, and Dan's screen is on. What I'd like to do now is just go through some of the questions and field them. Some of them have been answered possibly in the process of your presentations, but can I just say before we go to these questions, very, very interesting. I don't know if I'm speaking for the audience. They can always write in the chat box rubbish if they want to, but I'm very interesting presentation, very, very, very innovative. And it's gathering up lots and lots of things which you can read about separately around what's going on in different countries and around the UK, but not all in one place. So really very good. So going to go to these questions or observations, which so I'm going to go to the chat box first of all. No, I'm going to go to the chat box first.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Could Andy just stop sharing his screen, please?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine. That's what Christine is there for, to keep us in order. So here we go. The first question we had very early on was from somebody who is possibly a bit concerned that we're overemphasizing the concept of an importance of dealing with climate change. What they said was this: what is the evidence of a catastrophe? All the evidence suggests otherwise. The catastrophizing appears to be based upon models which have been constantly wrong over 40 years. Real world data does not show catastrophic warming. Well, obviously this person has a particular view. So I'm going to pass that across to Chelsea, first of all, to answer that. We don't need to answer these questions in great detail, Chelsea, but, you know, this person has possibly a different view to you.
I think people have different views and different interpretations. I personally think it is catastrophic, the potential for even minimal warming. And even if it turns out not to be catastrophic by some incredible stroke of luck, let's plan for it to be catastrophic, because that's what we're being warned about. And let's build to deal with these problems. If they don't come, fantastic, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be problematic. So let's think ahead.
Yes. Well, I'm going to stick my neck out and support what you've said, Chelsea, because one can react to different words. This word being used by the question is catastrophic. Well, I'm 75 now, and all I can say is things have changed little by little, by little by little by little, all through time. And if you watched a program on Euronews recently, probably wasn't on our own news here, about the problem that they've got in Germany with all the nuclear waste that they don't know what to do with. From my own experience, how winters have changed and how the if you like, catastrophic prospect of temperatures now rapidly rising. The issue of rising temperatures is a complicated one to explain. But my view is this, and I hope that you as a panelist will say the same, is that why not make buildings of low carbon content? Why not have low energy consumption? Why not have sustainable living? So you're walking to what you need to get to instead of jumping in the car. It all seems very sensible to me. That's my view. So anybody who wants to criticize that, please do put it in the box or put your hand up. Anyway, go on to the next one. In your cycle of impact.
Rick, I think Daniel had his hand up there. I think
Daniel, please carry on. Sorry.
They look like there are about 40 questions, so we could be here all night on the first one. So why don't we move on?
Yeah, sure. But I'm just trying to be fair to those people who may not be aligned to us.
I think seeing as I've come off mute, I'll say 30 seconds and then we'll move on. I think catastrophizing or not, if you go back to the 1986 Brunt report definition of sustainability, it's about, ensuring that, we can meet the needs of today without compromising the needs of the planet's ability of the planets to meet the needs of tomorrow. And it's about economic, environmental and social sustainability. And if you take all of those together, you're talking about, economic circularity, spending money locally, a huge green revolution as a massive economic opportunity, low car, high density development doesn't mean that we have to have skyscrapers everywhere. It just means that they're more social. So you've got better economic performance, more social places, and environmental credentials just back up the ability of the planet to kind of meet the needs of tomorrow. So these things, for me, it's catastrophe or not, it's just a really good idea. Anyhow.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry we dwelt on that one. I apologize. But anyway, the next question is about meeting the best EDP standards, equivalent credentials, about design and build life cycle cradle to cradle considerations. Probably been answered in the presentation that you've been made, because this was an early question. Any further comments on that? No.
I'll take this one if you like. Or Chelsea, we're about to.
Yeah, but whichever one.
Just to say that we are not at this stage. We're not aligned to any particular methodology for measuring embodied carbon as such, but we certainly will be reporting our embodied carbon and we'll be standing by it wholeheartedly. We're just at the moment at this stage we're not aligned to any one particular methodology.
Okay, thank you for that. Then the next one is waste is important, but it's hardly the most important high impact emission criteria compared with many others. I think you've probably answered this one in your presentation because this was quite early on. Are other high impact carbon and biodiversity impacts fully considered? I think you've probably answered this, but if you just want to say a few words, any of Chelsea or Dan or Andy? Just say something. If you don't want to, I'll carry on, because it's difficult for me to read the questions and see you as well, so I have to keep swapping screens. I think it's probably been answered, but
should keep going.
Keep going. Okay, I'll keep going. The site is bound by a river. I'm concerned that those in the development will not see the river, and those on the other side will only see a flood wall. Can you assure me this is as much consideration as possible given to how this will be minimized? But
yeah, maybe I'll start. Yeah, it's a super important point. Thank you. The existing site is bounded by a flood wall, and you can't really see the river from it unless you walk right up to the flood wall and look over it. So we obviously want to have direct visual connections to the water where we can, but we have to balance the need to protect the site and the town, in fact, from flooding. And so that's why we have the differing levels of riverfront access, so the high level Belvedere and the lower level waterfront access on the north and south of the riverfront. So we do just have to balance those things. And we believe that having a varied experience of the river is just as valuable as being able to stand on the street and look at it, which isn't really possible now. And to be honest, is technically very challenging to do whilst trying to protect the site from flooding. So when you look at it from the other side of the river, and that's why we're trying to introduce these ecological niches and break down the impact of the flood wall through planting up against it and within it, and probably spilling down from above as well, so that you don't look at a sort of 2 or 3 meter high flood wall. You have a very varying character of it, and it looks it doesn't look monolithic. But when you stand on the other side at the moment, you do look at a flood wall, and it's a bit taller, but it's not an order of magnitude taller than what we're proposing in most areas. So I hope that starts.
That's a good start, and I think also your presentation, both of you did partly answer that anyway. How is it going to blend in with Lewes' historic feeling, the castle, old buildings, the street scene? Well, I think Dan did answer this one in the latter part of his presentation. Again, this was fairly early on. Anything you want to add to that, Dan?
Only that last month we had a meeting with, we meet all the time with the South Downs National Park Authority, and we're working very hard on something called, and apologies if this is well known by the audience, but a landscape and visual impact assessment. And that talks about a lot of things, but what it talks about is character as well as the visual impact of the development. And we are working incredibly hard to try to understand, well, we've done the research to understand the character of Lewes. It's well defined in national character areas, local character areas. And then it's interesting that the technical work that's been done, there's been a consultant that's been working independently to define the baseline landscape and urban character with the local planning authority. And then we've been reacting to that as a master planning team. So it's quite a sort of rigorous process. And the landscape character and the townscape character of the site itself is recognised as this interface between floodplain, between medieval town, between the industrial uses on the other side of the river, the townscape rising up out of the floodplain, and then the site itself, which has historic industrial use, which is big volumes, directional roofscape, different materials to what people traditionally think of as Lewes, which is the high street. And actually the opportunity to be very diverse in that regard. So we're trying to do that. So it's quite challenging, because what we could do is just roll out a kind of vernacular townscape that was, that was a critique of the previous scheme. It was just copying Lewes as it was, but it wasn't viable, and it was built on top of a big concrete deck. What we're saying is there's a place for lots of architectural approaches, but the key thing is great streets and a walkable neighbourhood, and then the architects.
I think to be honest, if I may come in there just briefly, I think you did answer that quite well in your presentation. Actually, I thought it was very good. I might say that if the national park are concerned with landscape, they should be looking at what they've already given permission for in over on the other side of the river. If you look at that from up on the from the golf course, it doesn't look too good to me. So you're doing a good job in my books, and hopefully that will continue. Next question: is there a public slipway planned? Is it possible to send a record? Oh, sorry. Is there a public slipway planned?
I'm happy.
Chelsea probably can come in.
Thanks, Dan. I think I might have written something in the chat, but I spelt some words wrong, so I was in a hurry. Yeah, we initially were planning a public slipway about 2/3 of the way up the site, bit north of Tesco, but actually on the advice of lots of people who visited us at the Design Festival, the Pilot Gig Club, the Rowing Club, and a few others, we've now been working with them and agreed to actually move it further to the southern end of the site, so it's nearer the mobility hub, so anybody coming with a vehicle, with a canoe or something and wanting to get to the river quicker. So it was a better location. So those group of local people have been working with our engineers from Expedition to design how that access will work down to the river, because it has to go through the floodplain, through the flood defence. And if it's just a temporary defence that comes down, and is it a slipway or is it a pontoon, slipway onto a pontoon with piles? But we're working together to make sure it's the right kind of access point for quite a deep tidal range river.
Good, that's very good. Thank you very much. The next question is: there a real opportunity to work with local colleges to create a new generation of skilled, crafted people?
So I'll take that one. We've got so East Sussex College run a training program for long-term unemployed people, where they partner with a developer or a construction company and who identify a need of a certain type. So for instance, they might require 10 site carpenters in 6 months, and so the East Sussex College will run a training course that guarantees you an interview for that. Now they have been operating out of Eastbourne for the last little while, and in the last 3 months they've moved their facilities to the site here, so they're here already. They haven't started running courses here yet, but their facilities are here, and they're hoping to be running courses in the new year, so that's already happening.
That's very good, thank you.
I'll add to that we've already, it's such a good question and such an exciting thing to look forward to. We've already been doing various sort of projects and courses with young people from the college and from the local schools, which included working with the architecture and design and animation students down at the college on ideas for what little parklets would look like on the site, what our bridge might look like. So this is sort of meanwhile projects with students and young people. But going ahead, we have a substantial amount of space on site which we want to use for maker spaces, creative industries, etc., with facilities within which could be for training, learning, apprenticeships. It's a wonderful opportunity.
Very good, thank you very much. Got some comments here. The presentation is great so far, going in the right direction. One person says, I hope I shall be able to live in the development of North Street. There's a technical question here. I'm not sure if that's an observation. I'll go on to the next one. 1 meter tidal rise is real, though simple linear expansion of water with temperature. Have you considered this as the flood maps are published? I'm not sure if I understand that question, but 1 meter tidal rise risk is real, though simple linear expansively of water with temperature. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on tidal rise and flooding?
Quickly, well, as long as you like, really. But I'll try.
No. Just a brief answer, please.
So the short answer is yes. We're working with the Environment Agency. They're constantly revising their projections. They had a national blanket projection in 2016, and now they're revising that by region, and we're updating our work to suit that. But actually, the fluvial flood, so the water that comes down the river, the severity of that is above a 1 meter tidal range. So the flood defences have to protect above a 1 meter tidal range increase anyway to deal with the river water flooding.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Good point. there's a very detailed observation here, which I'll probably pass on to you from Jill Sutcliffe is about to running another webinar on a similar subject. So I'll pass on to the next question. And quickly running down here. Excellent, very good presentation. Right, next question, which is substantive in terms of a question. Are there existing examples of the sort of communal living that you describe, and how well will they work from a social perspective? Any answers on that one?
No one wants to start, so I will. Once I finish speaking, I'll try and grab some web links and put them in the chat, or send them afterwards, perhaps. There are. It's a very popular. So the model of co-living traditionally is more popular in Europe, and the structures are in place in Europe to form a group. So the way it works is there's two types: there's co-living and co-housing, and they have slightly there's a semantics difference really. But there are examples of them working. In Europe, there's more structures in place to support them. For example, banks will finance co-living, where a group of people will come together, create a brief, hire an architect, build a building, they want to live together, and a bank will finance that. There's not the products available to support that in the UK are less prevalent. That's just one example of the barriers that exist here compared to in Europe, but they do exist. And I think human nature's actually got us a process in place to try to support the groups coming together who want to live like that. So they're trying to break through the inertia that's created.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. I'm going to move on to some other questions. Sorry if I seem rude. The question here, which is quite an interesting one: how will the Foundry Medical Hub be accessed by patients with limited mobility?
I'm very happy to answer that. We are working, as I'm sure you all know, with the Foundry Medical Hub, have been for some months, and one of the architect practices, Mole, is working with them and us. The medical hub obviously needs parking space for people who actually need to get to it, and there is a discussion at the moment. There's various ways it might be done. Might be that when you actually book your appointment, you book your parking place under the medical hub. So there will be for people who need to get there, door to door. There will also be at the corner of North Street and the medical hub, we're going to be designing it there so that there's a sort of electric vehicle shuttle stop off. So people, if needs be, will be able to park at the hub. There will be a public transport or an electric shuttle going around town servicing this site, which will be run from the site, which will drop off there. And then there's the actual mobility hub is about, Dan, you might correct me, it's probably a 120-meter walk or something from the Foundry Health Hub. I mean, I would hope that we'll have better access to this health hub than most people do to their GP surgeries around Lewes.
Indeed, indeed.
Most of them, you haven't got a chance in hell of parking anywhere near them.
No, quite, I agree.
Less abled should be able to.
That's a good question. A very interesting question here from a lady who seems to live in Nottingham, and she says, thinking about how this would work, she's talking about this sort of communal living and no cars and just communal spaces. I live in Nottingham, and there are issues of bad behaviour in areas where there aren't cars. Would you see that the design would discourage antisocial behaviour, or would it be possible in a smaller community so that the community would be strong enough to prevent this sort of behaviour? I think it's a very interesting question.
Do you not think that quite often communities or housing are designed so that people look into their back gardens rather onto the street? Because the street's not a very nice place to look. It's busy and it's full of cars. Whereas if you bring housing round, encourage the housing to look onto the street, you've got thresholds, you've got tiny little gardens onto the street, people look onto the street, you've got eyes on the street. It actually becomes a natural sort of self-policing community. And I think quite often when the cars disappear, it tends to be that they've disappeared off big blank empty streets, and everyone's looking backwards anyway into the back gardens, and then you can have issues with crime. It's a very interesting point, but I think it's because we don't look onto our streets anymore as the communal place. We look away from them. Yeah, no, that is a very perfect. So I understand the answer. It's just that this is the problem of antisocial behaviour is a problem. But anyway, that's a very good question.
I think if I might just 30 seconds of coda on that bit, because it's a really important one. We're not banning cars entirely from all of the streets in perpetuity. So and we think that car traffic will be replaced by cycles and people walking, but also, if you need to use an accessible bay, for example, those will still be outside of individual homes, because obviously it's not appropriate to ask somebody who's a wheelchair user to park in a mobility hub and walk up 800 meters the other end of the site. So it's about a sensible reduction to allow these spaces to perform more of a social function. So it's actually supporting that, but not sort of completely banning of it. And also, if you go to buy a piece of furniture and you want to drop off at your house, you'll be able to drive there, drop it off and leave again. So there'll be some activity. It's just a rebalancing rather than a sort of wholesale banning, if you like. Perhaps I presented it in a bit of an extreme format, but we're trying to just grab invert the hierarchy to put the pedestrian and cyclist up here and the car down there. No. So there's lots of compliments about your presentation, Chelsea and guys. But it's just, it was a very interesting question in my book. I'm going to whiz through the questions now, because we ought to try and bring this to an end. People will want to get away, and some of them have gone already. So there's a question here. Could the panel tell us how the design will ensure the MSCP doesn't dominate the identity arrival to the site? I am sorry, I don't understand. An example is the problem in Brighton Marina. Also keen to hear what the ratio of parking to homes. Also, the same person wants to hear about EV charging provision. Could you do a quick answer to that one? Sorry about that. You have to do quick answers. No. I mean, I could do an hour and a half on mobility alone. So I'll try and be. So first point, dominating the arrival into Lewes. I mean, the arrival into Lewes is dominated by some sheds and Waitrose and a pretty busy road. So, we're trying to be better than that. But I take the point that we don't want to be building an 8-story car park on the edge of of Lewes. So we're working hard with the park on the size of it, and obviously that has to cater for policy requirements in terms of parking, or at least whatever we agree is the right level of parking. So the first thing is, we're currently proposing to reduce it in size to the original plan, which was in the festival. So to try to make sure it isn't dominating the causeway by being too tall. And then we will be looking to treat the envelope of it using vertical greening and photovoltaics. So we make use of these big surfaces that we have to generate energy and green them.
Yeah. Okay. I think you've clearly got a full grasp of it. I think this, this person are just raising those issues. I want to go to, if I may, I'm sorry, because we will run out of time. We can't answer all of the questions in the time we have available. But Christine has reminded me somebody has a hand up there. So let's have a verbal question. I can't see that hand. I'm sorry, Christine, could you switch the person on so they can ask their question? They might have got fed up with us, but let's see what they say.
Yes, Mike, I've asked them if they'd like to talk now, so let's see if it works.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, fine, good. I'm really interested in the acceptability of some of the communal spaces. I mean, they've been tried in a lot of places. All of the disastrous tower block developments in London depended on the assumption that there would be communal spaces. People don't feel safe in them. They don't feel their children are safe in them. They don't like to be overlooked. They don't use them. And they were very rarely properly maintained. Whereas private gardens actually have a serious, possibly unexpected benefit for health. I'm speaking as somebody who spent a lot of the last decade or so of my career as a public health specialist in London and as a researcher in health and geography at Queen Mary. And Queen Mary is in Tower Hamlets, which is has a very high Muslim population, but very high population of people who wear Muslim dress. And as a result of this, that with a lack of private gardens and the Muslim dress, rickets has become a serious problem. You would have thought it had gone. In private gardens, they relax the rules and allow themselves to get some sunlight on arms and faces. I didn't know about this till I was helping to supervise a PhD of a Muslim woman on precisely that topic. So I'm a bit concerned about the social and physical health effects of some of the proposals on that end.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, really interesting point to make. I think that two things I would say here. The first is about communal spaces outside or inside or otherwise. Obviously, stewardship and management is key to how this is going to be run throughout the neighbourhood. It is a sort of shared neighbourhood. So you can't just expect voluntary groups to hold things together. It will be a considerable part of the project, is how this will be looked after and kept safe and clean and for everybody. On your point about private gardens, I mean, I've nothing against a lovely private garden. I think for us that there's another issue here. It's about bringing, we need homes in Lewes desperately. We also need to make sure this is a viable scheme. The last plan had about 415 houses, most of whom with large private gardens, and it was simply not viable. It didn't happen. A lot of people have said, why didn't the last scheme get built? It's because the money just didn't stack up. And so there's too much space on roads, too much space on gardens. So we have to, anyway, to bring a viable scheme to build more homes, build some smaller homes, but they all need their own private outside space. It would just be smaller than at your standard private garden. And so to make up for that, we're looking for lots of well-stewarded, well-managed outside spaces. And of course, I think one has to remember as well, this isn't in the middle of a large city. You know, this site is right on the edge of a large recreation ground. It's right next to the wetlands leading up the Pels. It's not far from the Downs. People aren't trapped in a. It might be quite a high density site, but they're not trapped in a huge high density area.
Thank you for that. I'm just going to check to see if there are any sort of vital questions, but I have copied down the Q&A into my computer, so I'll probably be sending those round so we can put any answers to those questions on the website. I'm just going to check if there are any vital ones, but what I'm going to ask you to do now, because we are at 10 to 8 now, thank you very much for this, but would you like to sum up, Chelsea and your colleagues, in briefly in a few minutes where we go forward from here? And you mentioned that you're an outline planning permission in, what was it, May, but where you go from here.
Well, thanks very much, Vic. While you were saying that, I was thinking about that last question, and there's always the temptation, isn't there, when you're doing a project like this and you feel really passionate about it, and somebody comes up with a perfectly reasonable question or comment to kind of to slightly defend what we're doing, rather than always to listen. So I apologise if it ever feels like that. This really is a collaborative process. And so please, can we not leave it like this? If you go onto the website, there's and contact us, there's an info email there. Please contact any question, mention our names, whatever, and then we can actually engage more. There will be, as I said, another, a more official public exhibition in the early in the new year. We really want to work with everybody, and we would like feedback. We're not here presenting, even though we are, as Vic just reminded you, coming up to submitting an outline planning application. This is an iterative and collaborative process as far as we're concerned, right up till that point, and then that will be an outline with some detail, probably for the flood defence and some housing, and then we will sequentially be putting in other detailed applications over the next 3, 4, 5 years for different parts of the site as we bring it forward as a phased development. So there will always be opportunities as we go along to keep talking, to keep getting good ideas together, and to edit and alter as we continue. Dan, Andy, I'm sure you've got things you'd like to say.
Well, can I just say something before they speak? Just to give you a more positive view, I know that was a very difficult question, and it's a very valid question which that person put. But in the chat box, there's some very positive reactions to what you've been presenting tonight, Chelsea. So it may be that particular question may be a difficult question to end on, but the night has been, I think, quite successful. Lots of positive thoughts, lots of people looking for further information downstream. And there was one person who's just put a question in the Q&A box, was asking about when can these properties be bought? Can they be bought off plan? So it is rather positive, so don't be too concerned. But anyway, over to Dan and Andy for some final comments.
I don't think I need to gild the Louis anymore. I think Chelsea sums it up well. I'd like to see the PhD thesis of whoever it was you were mentoring to the person. I'm very interested. It's we've done a bit of research on this, ourselves, and understand it. We work in London communities a lot, which are more than 50% non-white British, and we understand that it's difficult. You can't cover all bases, and if you don't have a lived experience of a particular background, you shouldn't make assumptions about those things. It's something I'm very sensitive about. So I'm very happy to talk more about that. But just to come around more generally, we will be doing more engagement. I'm very hopeful that we'll get even more insightful commentary. So I would encourage anybody that's on this call to be in touch with us via the details that Chelsea's just mentioned, because we really do want to listen, because if we don't get it right for the communities of Lewes, it won't be a success. It's simple as that.
Yeah, very good. Andy, which final comments from you, sir?
Yeah, just to mention, this is it's possibly the most exciting project I've ever been involved in, and it's about to move into the exciting phase where we start to actually move it forwards. And so please stay in touch, everyone, and keep your ears to the ground as to what's going on, because things are going to change here quite quickly, and it's about to get quite exciting.
That's very good. And I'd like to thank the presenters, Chelsea, Andy and Dan, for some very interesting information. And certainly, I think, in terms of the national park, which stretches from Winchester to Eastbourne, Lewes is in the national park. This is probably, to take Andy's comments, one of the most exciting opportunities for sustainable development in the park. And you guys are really behind that and are going to achieve it, I'm sure. So thank you very much for your presentations, and thank you to all the audience for their participation. We will be sending an email round to the audience so that they can see the video of this session, and hopefully also see any of the some of the answers to the questions which we haven't already been able to answer tonight. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.